Hello everybody, my name is Wendy Dawson and I'm a transition consultant at the Department of Public Instruction. And just a little overview of what DPI does. DPI oversees public school systems. So again, not private schools. We do work with some charter schools, but really it's the public school system. And I just wanted to touch base just really briefly on the interagency agreement. That was the last slide that Shannon had up. The three state agencies, DPI, DVR, or DWD, and Department of Health Services have an interagency agreement between the three state agencies. And through our interagency agreement, we've created a technical assistance guide called the TAG, or the Transition Action Guide. And I think when DHS talks, they will actually give you the link that goes directly to the electronic version of the TAG, which is our most updated. But it really outlines the roles and responsibilities of all partners in the transition planning process. The parents, the student or the youth, the Department of Public the school district, DVR, children's long-term care, some adult long-term care, and also the mental health system. So it kind of outlines what all of those partners' roles and responsibilities are in the transition planning process. It also has a wonderful question and answer guide further back in the document in the appendix, and it outlines the 3 questions or 4 questions that should be asked when you have multiple funding streams for an individual. And so if you're interested in knowing who should be paying for what, if you reference that part of the guide, it really does make it very clear. If it's a school district IEP related to meeting IEP goals, the school district should pay, and so on. So I do encourage you to take a look at that TAG if you have questions about how those funding streams work and what the different partners in the process should be doing. Okay. So we're going to get into talking about, there we go, transition planning at the school level. So in your handouts, everybody should have gotten at all the locations a handout that's 2-sided. One side is the parent's guide to the PTP, and the other side is the student's guide to the PTP. So I'll be referencing that in just a second. But just wanted to kind of give you a brief overview of post-secondary transition planning from the school district. So this year in 2012, fall of 2012, was the first year that we, from the Department of Public Instruction, mandated the use of what's called the PTP application, which stands for Post-Secondary Transition Plan. Every school district, public school district in the state of Wisconsin, has been mandated to use this transition planning application to complete the transition portion of a student's IEP. So if you're hearing about this for the first time today, email me and I can get in touch with your school district. But your school district is required to use the PTP in this development process for the transition plan. And parents and students should receive a copy of this printed plan when it's completed. Just like you receive a plan, and I see people going, oh my gosh, what are you talking about? We'll talk, but we're going to walk through some of that in just a little bit. Now we're going to kind of talk about the components of transition planning and the PTP. So there are 7 required components of every transition plan that are laid out by the federal government. The first of those is that the student must be invited to their IEP. The requirement under the law is not that the student attend their IEP meeting, but the school district is legally required to invite them. That can be through a formal written invitation or through a verbal invitation, but they must document how they invited the student and which method they invited the student. The second requirement is that they must have post-secondary goals in the area of education and training, a post-secondary goal in the area of employment, And if applicable for that specific individualized student in that plan, independent living. So it's not required by law that they have an independent living goal, but if applicable, they should be addressing that. It's an IEP team decision. The third area is they must have some form of age-appropriate transition assessment. We'll talk about some of those. We're going to mention one on a further slide, but that could be something like an interview with the student, or it could be something very formal, like a learning styles inventory, or a career interest inventory, or a career clusters aptitude type of assessment. But that must be part of the transition planning process. So you're gathering that information about the student's preferences, strengths, and interests, and that's what you're using to develop those post-secondary goals. It should be something that's ongoing. It's not I do it once when they're in 8th grade and that's it. It's required every year by law that the school district do some form of age-appropriate transition assessment to develop that transition plan. The fourth area is transition services. Transition services are something that is happening while the student is still in high school, and it can be done with many different partners that are responsible for the various transition services. For example, opening a bank account. A student would need a bank account if they're ever going to be employed. I mean, most employers now do direct deposit and things like that. So it's really important for a student to open a bank account and start working on financial literacy. But obviously that's not a transition service that a teacher can go with that youth and say, go to the bank and say, I'd like to open a bank account today for the student. That's something that during the IEP meeting should be discussed. Who is going to be the person or people responsible for completing this transition service? So in that instance, it might be the youth themselves, obviously, if they're going to open a bank account, and maybe a parent or a guardian or a sibling, some family member that's able to go with them to the bank to open that bank account. So as you can tell, there are things that the school district should have responsibility for. The student obviously is going to be a partner in that, and then there are things that some of the outside people will have responsibility for. Okay? And if they're eligible for any outside agency services, there may be transition services that you write into that plan that may be DVR or DHS, or someone else may have responsibility for working with that student in. And the requirement under the law is they must outline those transition services for the current duration of the IEP. So if you had your IEP meeting, let's say today, at minimum they have to outline the transition services that are going to be completed in the next 364 days, or whenever in between today and when their next IEP meeting is, next annual IEP meeting. The fifth area is just what I had mentioned, the invitation of outside agencies if they are going to be providing or paying for any transition services. So if a student applied for DVR and they were determined eligible, the school district is legally responsible to invite DVR to that student's IEP meeting. Same with children's and adult long-term care. If the school district is aware that the student is on the children's long-term care waiver, they should be inviting those agency staff to that IEP meeting. And again, the important thing for you to know as a parent, you are always welcome to invite and bring those agency staff along without a formal invitation. You can invite them and bring them along. But the school district should be requesting you to sign a release of consent to invite those outside agency staff to the IEP meeting. Okay? The sixth area is the course of study. So basically, what classes is the student taking this year, and ideally you'd be planning for the future and laying out what all of the high school courses are that the student is going to be taking. And it's as simple as that. During freshman year, here's the list of classes that I'm going to be taking. Sophomore year, here's the list of classes I'm going to be taking. And these should all tie back into what the goals are for that student. So if the student wants to be a vet tech when they get out of high school. That's their employment goal. They should be taking courses while in high school that will lead them to that path. So they may be taking animal science as one of their science credits. It fits right with their post-secondary goals. That's the type of course that could lead them to potential employment in that area or prepare them for post-secondary education and training. The seventh area is they must have an IEP goal or objective that will reasonably enable them to reach their post-secondary goals. So again, if the student may be struggling with organization. Organization and time management is a skill that any person would need to be employed or attend any type of post-secondary education and training. So if they're struggling with that type of skill, they should have an IEP goal or objective that would help them address that area of weakness to prepare them for life after high school. Okay. So those are the 7 areas that are required by law in a transition plan. And what we developed the PTP to do was walk IEP teams through those 7 required components. Okay? So the PTP assists school districts to document the post-secondary or post-high school transition requirements really while meeting those individualized needs. So the PTP application is kind of, I kind of call it a TurboTax type of application. You answer questions, and as you answer the questions, it guides your navigation through the application. So if I answer yes, it's going to bring me down a different path than if I answer no to a certain question. And so they're answering yes or no and filling in just the minimal requirements to meet the law. But on every single question, there are what's called additional information boxes. And that's really used for the IEP team to capture that very student-specific individualized information. So I may check a box when I'm developing a goal that might say, after high school, Wendy will attend a 2-year technical college. But in that additional information box, I might know exactly which college I want to go to, or I might have 3 in mind that I really want to investigate looking into. And that's a perfect part to capture in that additional information box. Wendy is interested in attending either Madison College, Milwaukee Area Technical College, or Moraine Park Technical College. So I'm capturing that very student-specific information. And it really guides the IEP team through the transition planning process by asking those series of questions. And the intention behind when we created the application was for it to be completed or walked through during an IEP team meeting. We do realize that all school districts right now do not have a setup like we have here today so that they could bring it up and everybody could see and we could work on it during an IEP team meeting. Not all school districts have that technology yet that they can do that. But the intention behind the application is that we want it to be, a teacher can maybe even start something as a draft and then they bring it up during the IEP team meeting and you walk through all of the components and all the answers as a team. All right. And the one thing that I do really want to emphasize, and you have the link on your handouts on the parent and student PTP guide, the link to the PTP demonstration site. This really, there's no username and password to access this. For school staff to access it, it is a secure application. They need a username and password to log on to access this application to fill everything out. But the demo site does not require a username and password. Anyone can go on and use it. Agency staff can, parents can, youth can, anybody can go on, and it's an exact replica of the application that school districts use to create the transition plan. So it's really, I really recommend that you and your child go to the demo site and create your own draft and share that with the IEP team prior to going to the IEP team meeting. You can, the data on the demo site doesn't save, so you can't go back and look at it later, but you can create it and then you can save what you've created as a PDF. If you click on print PTP when you get to the end. And it'll download as a PDF, and then you can save it, and you could even email it to the teacher prior to the meeting and say, hey, we walked through this PTP. Here are our ideas for an input that we would like to provide prior to coming to the IEP team meeting. So again, you have a URL, and Shannon's got the demo site homepage up there right now. So when you get onto the homepage, what you're going to want to click on is Create PTP. It's the blue little tab right at the top. And then that's going to bring you to the first question, which is the date of the IEP meeting and if the student was invited. And then it'll just, I mean, it's really, really easy to navigate. There's navigation buttons at the bottom that say Next, Previous, or Save and Exit. I recommend, like I just mentioned, don't click Save and Exit because you won't be able to go back in because the data isn't stored anywhere. So when you have time, and you can go on and do this as many times as you would like, click on Create PTP and just follow all of the steps to create that transition plan. And like I said, you can save it as a PDF to your computer or email or whatever else you would like to do with it. But it'll give you all the options that are in the version that the teachers access when creating this. The other thing that I want to mention on this page that you're looking at is down at the bottom of this screen, there's a blue button called Learn More. Built on every single page of the PCP application, there are these blue Learn More buttons. These really are intended to be teaching and learning tools that you can access. What the Learn More button contains, the first thing on every single one is the procedural legal requirements for that component or that step. So it'll even give you the exact legal citation in the law that says this is what the law requires. The second component to each one of the Learn More buttons are what's called effective practices. So in an ideal world, this is the best practice that you could do with this step, and it'll give you some recommendations. On many of the Learn More buttons, we have web resources, web links, and we even have examples of different goals. So developing an employment goal, we give examples of different compliant employment goals, or suggestions or ideas on how to construct a goal or for transition services. So I recommend, and those are on the demo site as well. So if there are certain parts that you'd like to learn more about or want resources on, click on the Learn More button to get that additional information. And the big change, which is here on the slide, in creating a PTP or a transition plan for a student is the way we now develop our employment goal. We develop the employment goal in the PTP using the national career clusters and the career pathways. This is very different to special ed teachers, to parents, to students. It really is a new way of thinking about developing an employment goal. No longer do we just write a sentence like, after high school, the student will be employed as a vet tech. Okay? What we're doing is we're building our employment goal based on a career cluster, a pathway, and then the career level. So we could get down to that very specific vet tech. But the reason we are using the clusters and the pathways is because we want to base a student's employment goal based on transferable skills. So whether I want to be a vet tech or maybe a pet groomer or something to do with pets, I'm basing my employment goal based on a cluster of careers versus, oh, this is the only thing I want to do, and it have it be very, very narrow. So this website, the wicareerpathways.org, is really a great resource to find out about the clusters and the pathways and all the career levels. And the wonderful thing about this website is students can create an account on this website, and one of the first things that it brings a student through when they create an account is a career cluster interest inventory. So it's going to ask them a series of questions, ask them about their likes, their interests, things like that, and then it's going to come back with the results of saying, based on the information you provided, here are the clusters and the pathways we think you best match what you described by selecting your choices. and give that student the option to investigate careers in those areas. And they can save those searches, and it links to all of the post-secondary education institutions in the state of Wisconsin. And the other really nice thing is it does lay out, they call it in regular ed world, programs of study. In special ed world, in transition planning, we call it a course of study. But it'll outline that if you say you want to be a vet tech, you can search by your school if they have one available right now. Not all schools in the state do, but all the classes that they can take while in high school that will lead, prepare them for post-secondary education in that area. And they had to work collaboratively with an institution of higher ed to develop those programs of study.